Welcome to Crimes Through Time, snapshots of crime history. Imagine returning home after years abroad to claim your rightful inheritance, only to be branded a fake and thrown into prison. Or perhaps imagine executing the most audacious fraud in history, convincing a grieving mother that you're her long-lost son, nearly stealing one of England's great fortunes, and becoming a working-class hero. This isn't fiction. This is the extraordinary Tichborne case, a Victorian legal drama so sensational it divided a nation, created a popular movement, and raised questions about identity and class that remain unresolved to this day. Was he Sir Roger Tichborne, the aristocratic heir who cheated death at sea, or Arthur Orton, a butcher's son from London's East End, pulling off history's most brazen confidence trick? By 1874, this man had spent 188 days in court, bankrupted himself and his supporters, sparked riots, birthed a political movement, and captured the imagination of the entire British public. And yet, over 150 years later, some still wonder, did they imprison the rightful baronet? This is the story of the Tichborne Claimant. To understand this remarkable case, we must first understand the Tichbornes. This ancient Catholic family had been prominent in Hampshire since before the Norman conquest. In 1621, Benjamin Tichborne was created a baronet for services to King James I. By the 19th century, the Tichborne estate encompassed over 2,000 acres in Hampshire, along with properties in London and elsewhere, generating an annual income equivalent to £2.3 million in today's money. James Tichborne married Henrietta Felice in 1827, a daughter from a prominent French family. On the 5th of January 1829, Henriette gave birth to Roger Charles Doherty Tichborne, heir to the family's title and fortune. The marriage was unhappy. Roger grew up primarily in France, with his mother speaking French as his first language. It wasn't until 1845, at the age of 16, that his father sent him to complete his education at Stonyhurst College in England. After Stonyhurst, Roger joined the 6th Dragoon Guards in 1849, and during his military service, he fell in love with his cousin, Catherine Doherty. The family disapproved of the match, and the frustrated Roger eventually resigned his commission and decided to travel abroad. On the 1st of March 1853, Roger Tichborne sailed from England aboard the La Pauline, bound for South America. He spent 10 months travelling through Chile and Peru before reaching Rio de Janeiro in April 1854. There, Roger booked passage to Jamaica aboard the ship called the Bella. The vessel sailed on the 20th of April 1854. 4 days later, a capsized boat bearing the name Bella was discovered off the Brazilian coast. The ship was presumed lost with all hands. It would take until June 1854 before the Tichborne family received the devastating news that Roger was presumed drowned. But his mother, Lady Henriette, refused to accept that her son was dead. She clung to rumours that survivors from the Bella had been picked up and taken to Australia. When Roger's father died in June 1864, the title passed to the younger son Alfred. But Alfred was financially reckless and died in February 1865, leaving the family estate in disarray. Lady Tichborne intensified her search, and in February 1863 she began placing advertisements in newspapers offering rewards for information about her missing son. By May 1865 these notices had reached Australia through Arthur Culbert's Missing Friends Agency. In October 1865 astonishing news arrived from Australia. William Gibbs, a lawyer from Wagga Wagga, had identified Roger Tichborne in the unlikely form of a bankrupt butcher calling himself Thomas Castro. This man claimed he had been rescued from the sinking Bella by a ship called the Osprey, landed in Melbourne and subsequently wandered Australia under an assumed name. He had married a former servant named Mary Ann Bryant and fathered 2 children. There was just one problem. This Roger Tichborne was nothing like the slim French-speaking aristocrat who had departed England in 1853. He was massively overweight, spoke with a Cockney accent, and appeared to know very little about the Tichborne family. Nevertheless, with financial assistance from Lady Tichborne, the claimant, his family, and a small entourage, including a former Tichborne servant named Andrew Bogle, sailed for England. They arrived at Tilbury on Christmas Day, 1866. On the 11th of January 1867, Lady Tichborne met the claimant in Paris. Despite the physical differences, she immediately accepted him as her son. She signed a formal declaration testifying to his identity and settled an income of £1,000 a year. The rest of the Tichborne family, however, were unconvinced. They saw an imposter attempting to steal the family fortune and destroy their reputation. Lady Tichborne's brother, Henry Seymour, was particularly scathing, pointing out that the claimant neither spoke or understood French, despite this being Roger's first language. Yet support for the claimant grew. Several soldiers who had served with Roger in the Dragoons recognised him. The family's former solicitor and doctor accepted him. Even a distant cousin, Anthony Biddulph, declared him genuine. As suspicions mounted, investigators traced the claimant's movements. Shortly after arriving in England, he had visited Wapping in East London, inquiring about a family named Orton. The claimant was actually Arthur Orton, a butcher's son from Wapping who had gone to sea as a boy and had been in Australia during the relevant period. On the 11th of May 1871, the civil case of Tichborne versus Lushington, an action to eject a tenant from Tichborne Park, its real purpose was to establish whether the claimant was truly Sir Roger Tichborne. The case immediately captured public attention. The courtroom was packed daily, and newspapers reported every detail. Under cross-examination, the claimant displayed profound ignorance of matters Roger would have known. He could not identify Virgil, confused Latin with Greek, and had no understanding of chemistry, despite Roger's education at Sandyhurst. Most dramatically, he claimed to have seduced his cousin Catherine Doherty, a scandalous assertion that outraged the Tichborne family. On the 4th of March 1872, after hearing damning evidence that Roger Tichborne had distinctive tattoos, which the claimant did not possess, the jury declared that they had heard enough. The claimant lost his civil case and was immediately arrested on charges of perjury. From his cell in Newgate Prison, the claimant published an appeal to the public in the Evening Standard, requesting financial help. The response was astonishing. For many working-class Britons, the claimant represented one of their own, fighting against aristocratic privilege. Support committees were formed across the country. When released on bail in April 1872, a large crowd cheered him as he left the Old Bailey. Led by MP Guildford Onslow and anti-Catholic campaigner George Hammond Whalley, the claimant embarked on a nationwide speaking tour. 2 newspapers, the Tichborne Gazette and Tichborne News, were launched to support his cause. When Onslow and Whalley made accusations of government interference, they were fined £100 each for contempt of court. On the 21st of April 1873, the criminal case Regina versus Castro began at the Queen's Bench. It would become one of the longest trials in English history, lasting 188 court days. The prosecution, led by Henry Hawkins, called 215 witnesses from France, Chile, Australia and Wapping. They testified either that the claimant was not Roger Tichborne or that he was indeed Arthur Orton. The claimant's defence was led by Edward Keneally, an eccentric Irish lawyer known for his flamboyant style. Keneally claimed the client was the victim of vast conspiracy encompassing the Catholic Church, the government and the legal establishment. The trial reached a dramatic moment when Jean-Louis, a sailor, testified that he had been aboard the Osprey during the rescue of Mr. Rogers. Sensational as this seems, Louis was soon exposed as a convicted criminal who had been in England, not at sea, when the Bella sank. On the 28th of February 1874, after just 30 minutes of deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. The claimant was not Roger Tichborne, had not seduced Catherine Doherty, and was indeed Arthur Orton. He was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment. Far from ending the controversy, the verdict inflamed public sentiment. The Claimant and Keneally were hailed as working-class heroes, persecuted by the establishment. In April 1874, Keneally launched the Magna Charta Association, a political movement advocating reform. He was elected to Parliament in February 1874, but failed to persuade his colleagues to establish a royal commission into the trial, securing his own vote against 433 opposing. Meanwhile, the Claimant served his sentence, significantly losing weight in prison. Released on licence in October 1884 after serving 10 years, he showed little interest in the political movement that had emerged around him. Instead, he signed a contract to tour music halls and circuses. Public interest had waned. A trip to New York in 1886 failed, and he returned to England the following year, marrying music hall singer Leslie Ever, despite still being married to Mary Ann Bryant. In 1895, for a fee of a few £100, the Claimant confessed in the People newspaper that he was, after all, Arthur Orton. But he quickly retracted this confession and insisted again he was Roger Tichborne. His businesses failed, and on the 1st of April 1898, he died destitute from heart disease. Approximately 5,000 people attended his funeral at Paddington Cemetery, where he was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave. In an extraordinary gesture, the Tichborne family allowed a card bearing the name Sir Roger Charles Doherty Tichborne to be placed on the coffin. More than 150 years later, the Tichborne case continues to fascinate. While most accept the court's verdict that the Claimant was Arthur Orton, nagging questions remain. How could an uneducated butcher from Wapping conceive such an audacious plan from the other side of the world? How did he convince Lady Tichborne, whom he had never met, that he was her son? And why did so many people who had known Roger Tichborne, including military colleagues, accept the Claimant's identity? Various theories have emerged. Perhaps Orton and Roger were half-brothers, explaining the facial resemblance. Perhaps they were companions in crime in Australia, with Orton assuming Roger's identity after his death. The Claimant's daughter maintained until her death that her father had killed the real Arthur Orton and thus could never reveal his true identity. In 1924, she was imprisoned for making threats and demands for money to the Tichborne family. Without DNA evidence, which some have suggested might resolve the mystery, we may never know for certain whether the Claimant was truly Roger Tichborne or Arthur Orton. So what do you think? Was he an imposter? In my opinion, yes, I think he was. I don't blame Henriette for blindly accepting him as her son. Her grief, especially for her child, made her desperate, and I understand. I think the key is that a former Tichborne servant was with Arthur in Australia when he made his original claim and sailed to England. They would have had enough information to coach Arthur, just enough that people couldn't immediately dismiss him, and then once he had Henriette's support, it snowballed from there. But he gave himself away when he inquired after the Orton family. Why would Roger do that? He wouldn't, but Arthur Orton would. So what do you think? Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and let me know what you think of this case in the comments below, and I look forward to welcoming you in the next one.